Our disruption, if you will, is actually, as we're going into lunch, I'll tell you a little bit of a spy story, because I think we need something to be a little bit lively. Our story on the Dream Chaser goes back quite a long ways. I would probably say the first time that this really came to my attention was the movie many of us have seen, 2001: A Space Odyssey. That movie actually had its origins in a book that Stanley Kubrick found that was written by Arthur Clarke, originally a short story written in 1948. And in 1948, Clarke was imagining a time where there would be a space station and a plane that could go to that space station. And this image you see here is an image from the movie of a winged space vehicle that was going to a commercial space station. Anyone know who was operating that space plane? Pan Am. Which at the time the movie was made was the #1 company in the world. So talk about corruption. But our story for the Dream Chaser vehicle actually goes back to the Soviet Union, something called the Bohr 4. And it was a really fascinating story. And at one point in time, an Australian spy plane was flying over the South Pacific and saw a Russian trawler picking something up out of the water. It flew over at a very low altitude, took 30 pictures or so, and those pictures then came back. It was this picture you see in the upper right-hand corner, one of those pictures, of this vehicle that was floating around in the water. It was being hauled onto this boat that no one had ever seen before. The Australian plane sent the pictures to the Australian government. They didn't know what it was. They sent the pictures to the American government and the CIA and other agencies. They didn't know what it was. They sent it to NASA. NASA said, it's not ours. We don't know what it is. And then the American government, in its wisdom at that point in time, said, we don't know what it is, but we want one. So from that picture and from a lot of work that was being done, the U.S. government then reverse engineered a version of this vehicle, which became known as the HL-20. At the same time, the Soviets were very effectively spying on our space shuttle program, some of you may know, and they actually were able to get the entire set of plans for that space shuttle, and they built one, which you can now go visit if you go to Russia. It's in a big hangar, and it's almost an identical copy of the US version. NASA then turned this into something called the HL-20 in the 1980s and 90s, which was a really interesting vehicle. It was meant to be, at one point in time, a lifeboat for the space station. It could take 10 people down. At one point, we were going to have 10 people up on the space station. It was engineered by Rockwell and Lockheed. Did a really great job. If some of you know the movie Hidden Figures, Katherine Johnson was actually involved with this vehicle and helped design it. And a lot of work went into it. The work went into it for about 10 years. And then somewhere in the 90s, for a variety of reasons, budget, and we weren't going to have 10 people on a space station, this vehicle was put aside. And frankly, forgotten and buried, as a lot of aviation programs are. You just have to walk through this museum and you'll see some of them. Mm-hmm. We came along in 2004. 2004 was a big year. It was the year we were part of the team that won the X Prize, the first SpaceX Prize. And although we've heard different points of view, I would maintain that's probably where the modern day commercial space industry started during that period of time. We had been founded and started doing some work on rocket engines and some other things. SpaceX was founded at that time. A small group of us got together and created what became known as the Commercial Space Flight Federation, now representing about 80 different companies. And a lot of energy went into starting up of companies during that period of time, one of which was ours. And we made a bet. We had about 30 people in a garage in San Diego. And we looked at it and said, we made a bet that the space shuttle at some point in time was going to go away. And what would we do? At that point in time, it was not a commercial space program. There was no program with NASA to fund anything. And in doing that, what we said was, well, we don't really have the money or the energy or the ability to go start from scratch. What else is out there? So we went searching, and we found this program called the HL-20. It was buried in a lot of NASA documentation, and it was actually in a place called Langley, Virginia. I went out to Langley, met the people who ran the center at that point in time, and asked if we could borrow it. And they said, well, we don't know. It's about to be destroyed. It was on the destroy list for NASA at that point. So the only way you can get it is if you go talk to a NASA administrator who has the ability to help you do this. So I went up and talked to Mike Griffin, who was just becoming NASA administrator. Had a 15-minute meeting that turned into 3 hours. At the end of the 3 hours, we basically were able to license out and start working on this vehicle. And it was a fascinating process because we wound up getting lots of documentation from this period of 80s and 90s and really started looking through it. We were then able to take that and over a period of years turn it into the next generation, we think, Shuttle 2.0 flying space vehicle. This is our latest test vehicle, which is fully built, full design, full size vehicle out in flight testing right now out in Mojave at Edwards Air Force Base. And that period of time that came from where did we get the courage, if you will, or the ability to think about taking something that had been buried and turning it into a vehicle that could be flown at a time where there was no commercial space program, there was no funding. NASA didn't actually start funding us until 2010 in a partnership. We spent the first 5 years of our life doing this on our own. And it's a fascinating journey to be able to take that. And we are very much, this is a to-scale picture between our Dream Chaser and the Space Shuttle. But none of what we did really was from a pure point of view an original design. It went back to designs of people from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, all the shuttle work that was able to be done. One of the interesting things about this picture, although there's an obvious size difference, we have as much, or just about as much pressurized space inside for people as the Space Shuttle did. The Space Shuttle was designed to do many things. It was designed to bring up huge pieces of cargo to space and being on people, and it was designed to be basically everything for everyone. What we now see now is a divergence of being able to take critical cargo and people up in one way, and be able to take massive amounts of cargo up in a different way. And we call our vehicle the Space Utility Vehicle as a result of that. The world comes in really big circles, and in this disruption we see a lot of things. We are, as I mentioned, we're testing at a place called the Edwards Air Force Base, now called the Armstrong Flight Research Center, and it is a historic place. If any of you have seen the right stuff, that's where we broke the sound barrier, that's where the Space Shuttle was first tested. As you see here, this is the Space Shuttle in the hangar that was built for it up in Edwards and what was then known as Dryden. We are now being housed in the same hangar. NASA was really very, very kind to us to open it up. It's a historical place. And some 40 years later, as we see this story progress, we now become the next generation, the next vehicle that's going to be doing this type of work in this kind of fashion. And it is all about passing the torch. While we can disrupt, and we do disrupt, we can't forget that what we do is actually something that is benefited by all the work that's been done before us. We've been fortunate to be able to take this vehicle and win, as many of you know, a NASA commercial cargo contract. It's a multi-billion-dollar, decade-long kind of contract that will enable us to service the space station and do a significant amount of other work in space. But the core of being a commercial space company is not the fact that you're commercial. Every business, Lockheed, Boeing, every company that's ever worked was sitting in a Boeing hangar. From the day that Boeing started with his first seaplane over here on the lake, he was a commercial company. We all are. The difference is in my view, is the ownership of the vehicle. We own the vehicle, we own all the IP behind it, and NASA's buying the service. Because of that, we can reach out and start doing many other things. We have now announced a space program with the United Nations, the first ever mission for the United Nations. And this mission will take up 25 countries with us on their first visit to space. The UN Space Agency has now 84 countries that are part of it, most of which have never been to space. So we went to the UN because we now own a spaceship and a space system and said, why don't we do a mission together? And what was thought to be 3 or 4 or 5 years of work trying to get something through the UN got through in about 8 months. And the idea is that we're going to be able to take 25 emerging space countries with experiments on a long duration mission in space and bring them back home. Recently, we then took the next step in this disruption, and we were awarded a contract to be one of the companies to do a design and build of the next generation space station called the Gateway. And this project is now underway in Colorado. We will be building a full-scale ground prototype. And if you think about the journey that we were making, the journey from back when Arthur Clarke in 1948 said someday there will be a commercial space plane going to a commercial space station, we now find ourselves in that position. And this journey that we've taken in our company has taken us now to 7 of the 9 planets. We've been on multiple missions to Mars, multiple missions to many planets, and have in total now done 450 space missions from that place of starting with just this dream of saying we can do something very different. And we find ourselves in a position of being able to say that we are now a company that is both building that space plane that can fly to orbit in helping to build the space station gateway that we can fly to, which, if you think about it, science fiction has now become science fact many years later. I'd like to end with my favorite entrepreneur, Gandhi. Not many people see him that way, but I have had the saying in my office since I started in being a space entrepreneur. And I think it applies to virtually everything we've heard today. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And I don't think you can say it any simpler than that. Everything that I've ever done in this industry, first they looked at it and said, why are you bothered? You're going to build a space shuttle with 30 people. Then they fight you, then they laugh, and then at the end of the day, you wind up winning. So I want to thank you very much.